They stole from me for months before I ever decided to steal anything back. And when I say stole, I don't mean a couple apples rolling off a branch. I mean walking into my orchard at night filling plastic crates with fruit I'd nursed for 30 years and watching men in uniforms loaded into a van like it was their right. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I've been farming the same stretch of land outside Briar Glen, Pennsylvania since I was 28. I'm 61 now. The orchard sits on a gentle slope that catches the morning light in a way that still makes me stop even on bad days. 23 varieties heirlooms. Most grocery stores don't bother with trees. I grafted trees that came from my granddad trees. I pruned in blizzards because that was what you did if you wanted something to last. For a long time, we coexisted with the country club next door. Guests snapped photos with my rose as a backdrop, sometimes asked politely if they could buy a few crates for an autumn event. I said yes when the price was fair. Then they hired an event director, a man named Preston Hale Sharp Suits. City-smoothed confidence boots that had never seen mud, and things started to tilt. Preston showed up the spring he offered to feature my orchard leaning on my fence with that practiced smile. "Daniel," he said, "your trees are exactly the kind of local authenticity our clients crave." He talked about menus and experience-driven weddings. He talked about exposure. Then he offered $2 a bushel, $2 like he was doing me a favor. I sell at the market for 15 a bushel, sometimes more for the rare ones. He shrugged and suggested distributors if I wouldn't agree. He smiled as if the math was mine to applaud. At first it was small stuff, a few apples missing from lower branches you expect teenagers deer something. Then limbs were stripped clean deliberate. I set up trail cameras along the south fence because I'm a farmer, and that's what you do when you stop guessing. A few nights later, I sat at my kitchen table with whiskey and my phone and watched men in dark jackets climb my fence flashlights, cutting lines through the trees, passing crates over the fence to a van with the estate logo. They weren't sneaking snacks. They were harvesting. I drove to the club the next morning in my work boots smelling like coffee and fertilizer, and I walked into that marble lobby and played the footage for Preston while he pretended to be surprised. "We're neighbors," he said, cool and practiced. "Sometimes surplus is shared." Surplus. He said it like a courtesy. He offered the lowball contract again, $2 a bushel ongoing, and smiled like he'd done me a favor. I told him to pay fair market value for what they'd already taken. He sighed and mentioned litigation like it was a joint risk, like sounding reasonable was the same as being fair. They kept taking. By the time the wedding season hit, my best trees were being picked clean in the wee hours. I caught one of their kids thin nervous, and he said, "We thought we had permission." From who, I asked. Mr. Hale said it was arranged. Of course he did. It wasn't just fruit anymore. It was a story Preston was selling to his clients, the Mercer Orchard experience. He was selling what I'd built and smiling when I asked to be paid. I could have gone to the sheriff. I really considered it. But small towns have ties, donations, fundraisers, handshakes with county commissioners. If I blew it up, I'd be the cranky farmer upsetting local industry. Preston counted on that. He assumed quiet meant consent. He didn't reckon with the sort of stubbornness that lives in people who have planted trees and waited more seasons than they can easily count. I raise heritage pigs behind the orchard Mangalitsa's Gloucesters, the kind with thick faces and temperaments that surprise you if you're used to supermarket animals. I started them when apple prices dipped to keep something steady. My late wife Mary Ann used to joke I treated those hogs like house guests. She died 5 years ago, and chores like feeding the pigs were the steady rhythm that kept me upright. When I learned Preston was throwing his daughter's wedding at the estate, a tent, 300 guests, photographers, and a dessert table the size of a small island, I felt something in my chest tighten. I'd seen their social posts advertising the Mercer Orchard experience, using my trees and my name without asking. They were making a fortune from the look of my work and paying me pennies, then stealing when it suited them. The week before the wedding, they pushed farther into my land crates, missing from the shed locks tampered with. That was when it stopped feeling like a business dispute and became personal. I thought about calling the sheriff about mounting a case. But I also thought about standing in a marble hallway while a man in a tailored jacket told me my life's work was surplus. I thought about Mary Ann on the porch, about all the winters and blizzards and hands-on pruning that had gone into those trees. I thought about being the guy who swallows and keeps going because that's what farmers do. So I made a plan that was neither pretty nor clean. I checked the pig pasture fences a dozen times. I cleared the gates. I fed the hogs their last evening mash and watched them nose the bucket and roll and squeal under the stars. On the day of the wedding, the October air was absurdly warm, the leaves at perfect color, photographers already saying how magical the light was. I walked up to the rise above the pasture and watched the tent and the guests and the trays of desserts laid out in the sun. Pigs have noses that do not respect velvet ropes. They follow sugar and buttercream the way a dog follows a smell off the highway. I opened the gate slowly, then the next, then the one I usually keep latched for rotating pasture. 40 solid bodies surged forward when they caught the scent, grunting and happy and utterly unconcerned with proper etiquette. For a second, everything froze, the music, the laughter, and then 40 pigs crashed through the decorative hedge like it was tissue paper. They charged the dessert table in a way that would have made slapstick writers weep with joy. The $10,000 cake went first tilting and collapsing slow motion into a cloud of white frosting. Champagne towers shuddered and fell, trays flew, heels sank into turf. Guests screamed the high, sharp pitch that people scream when the script of the evening rewrites itself in an instant. Preston came running, his face already the color of the roses. His daughter stood near the altar with mud on her dress and a pig nuzzling close enough to ruin a veil. He charged toward the hedge and called my name like I'd personally ridden in on a boar. I stayed on my side of the property line, hands on the fence post, watching the aftermath of months of being treated like scenery. "Did you release them on purpose?" the sheriff asked, later voice even. I let the silence stretch before I answered. "I manage gates," I said. "Animals sometimes find weaknesses." He paused, then mentioned that inquiries were also underway about food sourcing. A few people had been injured, twisted ankles, and a broken wrist, enough to make insurance companies interested. When investigators started asking about where produce came from, the trail cameras I'd stashed in my pocket made the story change. The footage of Preston and his staff harvesting my trees at night came to light, and suddenly the narrative flipped. Headlines called it poetic payback. Comment sections divided between outrage and laughter. The insurance company denied the venue's claim, citing unauthorized use of stolen goods. Preston's smile shrank. Within days, he resigned. The club's board came round with suits and careful words and an offer to purchase the rest of my harvest at a fair price, upfront written contract and compensation for what they'd already taken. I signed. Not out of victory so much as exhaustion. Tired of sleeping with one eye open, tired of checking locks and counting crates. The orchard settled back into its rhythm, sunrise walks pruning the comfortable ache of doing honest work. The hedge got replaced with reinforced fencing, contracts replaced clandestine pickups. My pigs went back to doing what pigs do, slightly heavier and slightly worldlier. I don't pretend what I did was noble. It was messy, it risked humiliation and collateral damage, and it could have gone sideways in 100 ugly ways. I think about the bride sometimes, about mud on silk and a ruined dress, and I wonder if a court might have been cleaner, less shameful. But I also remember standing in that hallway when a man told me my life's work was surplus and felt something in me harden into a decision. The lesson I carry isn't a triumphalist one. It's more a truth. Quiet isn't always strength, and silence can be taken for consent. People with influence can rewrite your story if you let them, and sometimes the only language they understand is consequence. That doesn't mean I recommend retribution. It's a dangerous teacher, but it does mean you should protect what you build and not assume the world will police fairness for you. So here's the question I'm leaving with you, and it's a blunt one. Was it justice or revenge? Did pride push me too far, or did I finally hold someone accountable who'd been treating me like scenery? Tell me what you think. Share a story if you've got one. A time someone tried to take from you, or when you felt small and had to decide whether to stand up. If you believe small farmers deserve to be heard when bigger players try to write them out of the story, drop a comment and tell me. I want to know if I was right or if I crossed a line. Because sometimes the only thing stronger than a polished narrative is 40 hungry pigs, and sometimes that is exactly what it takes to make people look.